The public shamed the market was alive with noise. The cries of merchants filled the air, and the smell of sweat and dust mixed together. Crowds pushed against each other, laughing, bargaining, and shouting. But today, there was something different. In the center of the square, something cruel. A group of guards dragged a young alien girl into the open, her hands bound tightly. Her clothes torn away until nothing was left to protect her dignity. She stumbled, her bare feet scraping against the rough stones, her body shaking from cold and fear. The crowd roared with laughter. Men and women pointed fingers at her, children threw stones. She tried to cover herself with her arms, but every movement only brought louder jeers. Rotten food was hurled at her, squashed fruit, spoiled meat, and handfuls of dirt. The smell clung to her skin, and tears ran down her face. Her eyes glistened, wide and desperate, searching the faces around her for one shred of kindness. But none came. "She is worthless," shouted a fat merchant, his voice carrying above the crowd. "A failure, a curse," yelled another. The people agreed, spitting at her, mocking her. They had seen many slaves before, but this one was different. She was left unclothed on purpose, humiliated in front of everyone. It was a punishment, a warning to others. The girl tried to stay upright, but her knees buckled and she fell. The stones cut her skin, leaving red streaks on her legs. The crowd only laughed harder. Some whispered cruel stories about her, saying she was once from a proud family, now reduced to nothing. Others claimed she was a thief, a liar, or even cursed by the gods. But the truth did not matter. What mattered was the entertainment of the mob. She cried out weakly, her voice breaking, "Please, stop." Her words were swallowed by laughter. No one cared. She was not a person to them. She was a joke, a piece of garbage to be thrown around at the edge of the market. A lone human stood silently. He was tall, with a traveler's coat still, new and clean, the dust of the road barely touching it. His eyes were sharp, watching everything. But his face showed no smile. Unlike the others, he did not laugh. He did not mock, he only watched. When a rotten apple struck the girl's face and slid down her cheek, he clenched his fists. His heart pounded in anger. But still he did not move. Not yet. The girl lifted her head slowly, her hair matted with dirt, her lips trembling. For a brief moment, her eyes met his. In that instant, she saw something no one else carried: pity, maybe even mercy. Her breath caught. Her body shook even harder, but the crowd pushed her head down again with more stones. Her gaze was lost, swallowed by cruelty once more. The human felt heat rise. Inside him, a storm building. He had seen war. He had seen death. But this was different. This was not battle. This was not survival. This was cruelty for pleasure, and yet the people around him enjoyed it. Their laughter rang in his ears, mocking not just the girl, but the very idea of compassion. The girl tried once more to stand, her thin body wobbling. The guards kicked her back down, pressing her face against the stone. Her tears mixed with dust, leaving dark stains. She whispered again, this time so faint that only the nearest could hear, "Please, someone help me." The words were fragile, almost lost, but they carried through the crowd like a ghost. The people laughed louder, as if her weakness was the punchline of a cruel joke. But one man did not laugh. The human's jaw tightened, his hands curled into fists. Something inside him cracked. He could no longer stand still. The cruelty had gone too far. The alien girl felt another piece of spoiled fruit hit her back. But before the next strike came, a heavy silence spread. The laughter faded. Voices grew. Quiet, feet shuffled nervously. The human was moving, stepping out of the crowd, his coat catching the faint sunlight. Every eye turned to him, wondering what he would do. The girl raised her head again, confusion and fear mixing in her gaze. Her lips parted slightly, her breath trembling. Could it be? Could someone actually step forward? The human walked steadily, his boots striking the stones with purpose. The crowd watched in disbelief. Some whispered, "What is he doing?" Others sneered, "Is he mad? It's just a filthy alien." But he did not stop. Every step brought him closer to the broken girl lying in the dirt. The alien girl blinked through. Tears, her heart beating faster. No one had come before, no one had cared. Why was he different? Her mind raced, torn between hope and fear. If this was another form of cruelty, she would shatter completely. But if it was not? The human stopped just a few feet away, his shadow falling over her fragile form. The crowd waited, breath held. As the girl trembled under his gaze, for a moment the world seemed to freeze. Would he join the laughter or change everything? And that was how her story of shame turned into something far more dangerous the moment a human dared to step forward. The human appears, the crowd's laughter still echoed, harsh and cruel. The alien girl lay curled on the ground, her thin arms wrapped tightly around herself, her eyes closed as if she wanted the world to disappear. Her body shook not only from the cold, but from the weight of shame pressing down on her above her fruit skins. Dirt and scraps of cloth rained down. Like poison, every insult thrown by the crowd felt heavier than the stones. And then, a shadow cut across the light. The human stood just a few feet away, his boots planted firmly on the cobblestones, his coat, still clean and new, seemed out of place in the filth of the marketplace. His face was calm, but his eyes burned. With quiet fire, he had seen cruelty before, but not like this, not the kind where dozens found joy in crushing one helpless soul. The crowd noticed him, whispers running like sparks through dry grass. "Who is he?" One voice asked. "A stranger?" said another. "A human," spat a third. With disgust rolling off the word, they expected him to join the laughter, or perhaps throw something of his own. But he did not move. Not yet. The girl felt the sudden silence around her and slowly raised her head. Her hair stuck to her tear-stained face. Her lips trembled when her eyes met his. She froze. He was not laughing, he was not mocking. He was simply looking at her, steady and unshaken. It was as if he saw her differently, not as trash, not as worthless, but as a living being, for the first time in what felt like forever. Her heart gave a weak, uncertain flutter of hope. Could it be real, or was this just another cruel trick? The human's fists unclenched, and slowly he took off his coat. The movement drew gasps from the crowd. "No," muttered a man angrily. "He wouldn't dare," hissed a woman, but he did. The coat, dark and heavy, still smelled faintly of firewood and leather. He bent down, his hands steady, and draped it over the alien girl's shoulders. The fabric fell like a shield, covering her body. Protecting her from the gazes and jeers, the girl clutched it tightly, her fingers digging into the fabric as if it was the only thing keeping her alive. Her tears came again, but this time they were different. They carried relief, disbelief, and something she thought she had lost long ago. Dignity. The crowd erupted, not with laughter this time, but with outrage. "What is this human doing?" Someone shouted. "She is nothing. Let her rot," cried another, but the human stood tall, his hand still resting gently on her shoulder. His calm voice cut through the noise, enough that one word silenced the marketplace. It wasn't shouted, it wasn't angry, but it carried weight. The crowd shuffled uneasily, no longer laughing, no longer sure. There was something about the human's tone, a quiet authority that made their insults feel small. The girl looked up at him, her voice faint. "Why? Why would you do this?" Her question shook with fear and confusion. No one had asked before, no one had cared. The human glanced down at her, his expression unreadable. "Because someone should," he said simply. "The guards who had dragged Her here stepped forward, their faces twisted with anger. "This is none of your concern." "Human," one growled. "She is a criminal, a disgrace. She deserves nothing." The human's eyes narrowed. And for a moment, the guards faltered. He did not raise his voice. But his silence pressed against them harder than any blade. He turned back to the girl, gently helping her rise to her feet. Her legs shook, but his hand was firm, steady, like a wall she could lean on. The crowd murmured louder now, voices clashing, some angry, some confused, and a few quiet, almost ashamed. Never before had anyone dared to protect one of the worthless. And yet here he was, a human, standing before them all. The girl stumbled as she tried to stand, but he caught her, steadying her. Her heart raced, her mind spinning. She whispered. Again, barely able to form words, "You'll be punished for this. They will not forgive you." The human's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Let them try," he replied. The mob did not cheer, nor did it laugh. They only watched, silent and tense. As the human lifted the girl to her feet, the coat, wrapped around her body like armor, shielding her from every cruel gaze, step by step. He led her through the stunned crowd. No one dared to block him. No one dared to touch her now. The girl clung to his sleeve. Her body still weak, but her spirit flickering, back to life. She didn't know who this human was or why he had chosen her. But for the first time since her fall, she felt a spark of safety. A stranger had stepped forward when no one else would, and that act alone was enough to change everything. The market, once filled with laughter and cruelty, was left in silence. The people stood frozen, watching as the human and the alien girl disappeared into the streets. Whispers spread like fire about the coat, about the courage, about the human who had dared to break the unspoken rules. And somewhere deep inside the alien girl's heart, a fragile voice whispered, maybe, just maybe, she still had a chance. At life, the code of protection, the streets of the alien city stretched long and narrow, lined with stone houses and crooked lanterns. The human walked with slow but steady steps. The alien girl leaning weakly against him, her bare feet dragged against the cobblestones, and every step sent a shiver of pain through her fragile body. But the weight of the coat over her shoulders gave her a strange warmth, not just against the cold air, but against the stares that still followed behind them. The marketplace was still buzzing, the crowd whispering in disbelief. No one had ever seen such a thing. A human shielding a dishonored alien girl, for many. It was madness. For some, it was bravery. But for the girl, it was life itself. Every time she pulled the coat tighter around herself, her chest tightened with emotion. It was not just fabric, it was a wall between her and the cruelty of the world. The human glanced down at her, his sharp eyes softening slightly. "Keep walking," he murmured, his voice calm. She nodded faintly, though her body wanted to collapse. The weight of hunger, cold, and shame pressed against her. But something inside whispered that she could not fall now. Not while this stranger stood beside her. They turned into a narrow alley to escape the open square. The sound of footsteps followed, angry and hurried. The guards who had humiliated her were not ready to let them go. "You dare shame us, human!" One bellowed from behind. "Give her back. She belongs in the dirt." The girl froze, clutching the coat, terror flashing in her eyes. But the human placed his arm firmly in front of her. Shielding her once again, he turned, his gaze sharp as a blade. "She belongs to no one," he said evenly, his voice steady like stone. The guards hesitated, the weight of his words heavier than they expected. The crowd had fed them courage earlier, but now, in the empty alley, with only his eyes fixed on them, their courage cracked. One spat on the ground, growling, "You'll regret this." Before backing away, the others followed, muttering curses, but none dared step closer. The girl let out a trembling breath, her knees almost giving way. She looked at him with wide eyes. Why? Why do you protect me? Her voice was broken, almost afraid of the answer. The human paused, looking at her for a long moment. Because you needed someone, he said at last, simple and true. Her throat tightened, tears stinging her eyes again. She clutched the coat tighter, pulling it up to cover her neck, her chest, everything she had lost in front of the crowd. It was more than warmth. It was dignity. She had been stripped of everything, but now, wrapped in this coat, she felt human again, alive again. The people who spat on her could no longer touch her, not through this shield he had given. They reached a quieter street. Where the houses were small and the lanterns dim, the girl stumbled, her legs shaking too much to hold her weight. The human caught her gently. Lowering her onto a stone step, she sat, pulling her knees to her chest beneath the coat, her eyes lowering in shame. You don't know me, she whispered. You don't know what I've done, why they hate me. The human knelt beside her, his expression calm but firm. I don't need to know, he replied. I saw enough. The girl blinked, confused. Enough? She asked softly. Yes, he said. I saw cruelty. I saw a crowd that forgot what mercy is, and I saw you. Left to suffer alone, he leaned back, his gaze lifting toward the sky above the narrow roofs. That was enough to make me act. The girl's chest ached, hands trembling as she held the coat close. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. No one had looked at her and seen anything but filth. And yet here he was, not asking her worth, not demanding proof, simply giving her protection. For the first time in years, her heart felt something fragile. Hope, the silence, stretched between them, broken only by the faint flicker of lanterns. The girl finally whispered, "This coat. It feels heavy, not because of the cloth, but because it carries something I don't deserve." The human turned to her, his brow furrowed. No one deserves shame, he said firmly, but everyone deserves a chance. Her eyes filled with tears, and she quickly hid her face in the folds of the coat. Her body shook with silent sobs, not from pain this time, but from release. The human let her cry, his presence steady beside her, not demanding, not questioning, simply there. The coat shielded her body, but his choice, his action, shielded her soul at that moment. The girl understood he was not just protecting her from the cold or the eyes of the crowd. He was protecting her from being lost completely, from believing she was nothing. The coat was only cloth, but the meaning behind it was unbreakable. It was a shield, a promise, and maybe even a spark of something more. The girl lifted her head slowly, her eyes red but brighter than before. She whispered, almost to herself, "I will never forget this." The human nodded once, his gaze steady. "Then don't," he replied. "Stand when you can, walk when you must, but never let them take who you are." And under the dim lantern light in that quiet street, the alien girl clung to the coat like life itself. The crowd had stripped her bare, but the human had given her back something they could never touch, her dignity. Escape from the crowd, the city did not forget quickly. Rumors spread faster than fire. Traveling from one street to another, by the time the human helped the alien girl walk again, half the town had already heard about the man who dared to cover a worthless slave with his coat. Whispers rose from every corner as they moved, some filled with shock, some with hatred, and a few with curiosity. The girl walked slowly, her weak legs trembling under her weight. Every step felt heavy, but she clung to the coat, pulling it tight. Around her body, behind her eyes, shame still lingered, but now it mixed with confusion. Why was he doing this? Why risk himself for her? The human guided her through narrow alleys, choosing paths where fewer eyes would follow. But even here, Shadows moved, figures lurked, and angry whispers chased them. "Traitor," hissed one voice from a doorway. "Filthy." "Alien lover," spat another. The girl flinched, pressing closer to him, her heart pounding. She was terrified not for herself, but for the man beside her. They would not forgive him for protecting her as they turned another corner. The sound of boots echoed behind them, heavy and sharp. The guards were coming again, this time not with mocking laughter, but with fury. "Stop where you are, human!" One shouted. The girl froze, her body going rigid. But the human did not stop. He kept walking, his pace steady, his grip on her arm strong. The guards grew louder, closer, their voices thick with anger. "You think you can steal from us? That alien is ours. She belongs in chains." The girl's breath caught, panic filling her chest. She pulled at his arm, whispering urgently, "Please, leave me. They'll hurt you. They'll kill you." But he shook his head firmly. "Not slowing down. They will have to go through me first," he said, calm but unyielding. The alley grew tighter, the walls closing in on both sides. Torches flickered at the far end, casting long shadows. The girl felt trapped again, the memory of the marketplace returning like a nightmare. But the human's presence was different from the crowd. He did not let her fall. He did not let her face it alone. Suddenly, the guards appeared at the mouth of the alley, their armor clanking, their weapons gleaming in the dim light. The leader sneered, his teeth yellow under the torch glow. "Step aside, human. This is your last chance." The human said nothing, his eyes steady as stone. The girl trembled, clutching the coat so tightly her fingers ached. One guard stepped forward, raising his whip. The human shifted, pulling the girl behind him, his stance solid like a wall. The guard swung. The whip cracked through the air, but the human caught it with his bare hand. Gasps echoed through the shadows. The guard stumbling back in shock. The human's hand bled where the leather had torn his skin. But he didn't let go. He yanked hard, pulling the whip from the guard's grip and tossing it to the ground. "Enough," he said, his voice like iron. The guards hesitated, fear creeping into their eyes. This was no ordinary traveler, no weak outsider. Something about his presence, his courage made them falter, but their pride burned hot. And they could not back down in front of each other. They growled, drawing their blades. The girl gasped, pressing against the wall, tears spilling from her eyes. She whispered again, "Please, don't fight them for me. I am not worth it." But the human turned his head slightly, meeting her gaze. "You are worth more than they will ever understand," he said. The fight was short, but it was fierce. The human moved with precision, striking fast, every motion sharp and controlled. He disarmed one guard with a twist of the wrist, knocked another against the wall with a solid blow. The clash of steel echoed. The smell of sweat and fear filled the alley. The girl watched, clutching the coat, her heart racing, unable to believe what she was seeing. One man against trained guards, and he was winning. Within moments, the guards lay groaning on the ground, their weapons scattered, their pride shattered. The human stood tall, blood dripping from his wounded hand, his chest rising and falling with steady breaths. The girl's eyes widened, all mixing with fear. He turned to her, his expression calm once more, as if the fight had been nothing but a small interruption. "Come," he said simply, extending his hand. Her fingers shook as she reached out, gripping his hand tightly. He pulled her forward, and together they stepped over the fallen guards, leaving them behind. The night swallowed them as they moved deeper into the city's forgotten streets. For the first time in years, the girl felt the chains of her shame break. Not because she was strong, but because someone had chosen to be strong for her. As they walked, her voice came softly, trembling. "You should not have done this. Now they will come for you. They will never stop. The human glanced at her, his jaw firm, his eyes burning with quiet resolve. "Let them come," he said. "I will not give you back to them." Her heart tightened, tears spilling again. But these were no longer the tears of despair. They were tears of something she thought she could never feel again: hope, wrapped in his coat, shielded by his courage. She realized the truth. The escape was not just from the guards, not just from the crowd. It was an escape from a life where she was nothing. And now, for the first time, she could imagine being something more. Safe shelter. The night grew darker as the human led the alien girl through winding alleys and quiet streets. The lanterns burned low, their light flickering against the stone walls. The air carried a chill, but inside the coat she felt a warmth she had not known in a long time. Her bare feet were bruised and sore, yet she followed him, step after step, afraid to let go. Finally, they reached a small house at the far edge of the city, where the streets grew silent and empty. The wooden door creaked as the human pushed it open, guiding her inside. The air smelled faintly of wood, smoke, and something simple but comforting. It was not a palace, not a rich home, but it was safe. For the girl, safety felt like a forgotten dream. The human closed the door behind them and lit a small lamp. The soft glow filled the room. Pushing back the shadows, the girl stood frozen near the entrance, clutching the coat around her body. Her eyes darted around, wary, as if expecting more cruelty to spring from the dark. But no laughter, no stones, no whips followed her here. Only silence, broken by the crackle of a fire in the corner. "Sit," the human said quietly, pulling out a chair. His tone carried no command, only calm suggestion. The girl hesitated, then lowered herself slowly, her legs shaking as she sat. She had never been invited to sit before. Slaves did not sit. They knelt, they crawled, they obeyed. But here, he offered her a chair, as if she was equal. The human moved to a small shelf. Taking down a bowl and a loaf of bread, he placed the food before her, along with a cup of water. Her eyes widened, her lips trembling. No one had given her food without demand. No one had placed it before her as though she had a choice. She stared at it, her body hungry, yet her mind unable to believe it was truly for her. "Eat," he said, his voice steady. Her hands shook as she reached forward, breaking the bread into small pieces. The taste was plain, but to her it felt like the richest feast she had ever known. Tears filled her eyes as she ate, trying to hide them, but failing. The water cooled her throat, washing away the dust of the marketplace. Every bite carried more than food, it carried kindness. The human sat across from her, watching quietly. He did not rush her, did not stare too long. He simply waited, as though the silence itself was enough. After a while, the girl lowered the bread, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Why? Why are you doing this? You owe me nothing." The human leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable. "I could not stand and watch," he said. "That is enough reason." Her heart twisted, her tears falling again. She pulled the coat tighter, whispering, "I don't understand. No one has ever cared before, not even my own kind." The human's eyes softened. "Then they were wrong. You should not have been left to suffer." The fire crackled in the corner, its warmth filling the room. The girl's shoulders slumped, the exhaustion of the day weighing down on her. Her body ached, her mind fogged, yet inside her chest a fragile spark glowed for the first time. She felt that maybe she was safe, even if only for this night. The human noticed her struggle to keep her eyes open. "You should rest," he said. Quietly, standing to fetch a blanket, she stiffened, fear flashing in her eyes. "Rest? Here." Her voice shook, memories of betrayal and pain clawing at her. She had been promised rest before, only to wake in chains. But the human simply laid the blanket near the fire, smoothing it out. "You will be warm here," he said. no one will harm you. Her breath caught, her body trembling. Could she believe those words? Could she trust him? She lowered herself slowly onto the blanket, wrapping it tightly around her. The coat still covered her shoulders, and between the coat and the fire, she felt wrapped in more warmth than she had known in years. The human returned to his chair. Leaning back but staying awake, she noticed his eyes remained watchful, scanning the shadows as though guarding her. That thought eased her heart, letting her close her eyes at last. The silence of the room wrapped around them both. The girl drifted between sleep and waking, her mind replaying the cruelty of the crowd, the stones, the laughter, but each time the memory grew too sharp. She felt the weight of the coat against her skin and remembered the human's steady voice. "You are worth more than they will ever understand." The words echoed inside her like a shield, pushing back the darkness for the first time. She allowed herself to imagine a life where she was not hated, not mocked, a life where someone stood beside her instead of turning away. She knew the danger was not over the guards, the city. Even her own kind might come for her again. But tonight, she was safe. Tonight, she was no longer alone, and as sleep finally claimed her, the last thing she saw was the human sitting by the fire, silent and strong. A protector who had given her something no one else had ever given: shelter, warmth, and dignity. Secrets revealed. The night passed slowly inside the small shelter. The fire burned low, its glow soft and warm against the wooden walls. The alien girl slept at first, her body too exhausted to resist, but her sleep was restless. Filled with dreams of chains, laughter, and stones, more than once she stirred, clutching the human's coat tighter around her shoulders, as if afraid it would be taken away. Each time, her eyes flickered open only to find him still there, sitting in the chair near the fire. Silent but awake, guarding her, that steady presence kept the nightmares from swallowing her whole. By morning, the light of dawn filtered through the cracks in the shutters. The girl sat up slowly, her hair messy, her eyes red but calmer than the night before. For a moment, she looked around in confusion, not used to waking in a place without chains or whips. Then her gaze fell on the human, who had finally dozed off. Leaning back against the chair, his arms crossed, the sight of him sleeping, unguarded, struck her deeply. Why would someone like him waste his strength, his time, to protect someone like her? She hugged the coat tighter, feeling its weight. It was not just cloth anymore, was the first proof that she still had worth. Her lips trembled as she whispered to herself, "Why me?" The human stirred, opening his eyes slowly, his gaze meeting hers. He straightened in his chair, his voice calm. "You slept." She nodded faintly, then lowered her head. I don't remember the last time I did." Without fear, silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft crackle of the dying fire. Finally, the girl spoke again, her voice unsteady but firm. "You should know the truth before you waste more of yourself on me." The human tilted his head slightly, waiting, saying nothing. She drew in a shaky breath, her hands tightening on the coat. "I was not always like this. I was not always garbage," she whispered, her voice filled with both pride and sorrow. "My family, they were of noble blood, respected in my people's halls. My father a leader, my mother a voice of wisdom." Her eyes shimmered with tears, but she continued, "I was their daughter, dressed in silks, trained to speak with grace, told I was the future of our house." Her lips curved into a broken smile. "And now look at me. Stripped, thrown in the dirt, mocked by children." The human's eyes softened. But he still did not interrupt. Her voice grew harsher, trembling with anger and pain. "They betrayed me. The ones who called themselves family, they sold me out. When enemies came, left me to take the blame for their deals." Her nails dug into the coat's fabric, so they dragged me through the streets. "Called me worthless, told the world I was cursed, and the people believed it. Her breath shook, her shoulders trembling as the weight of her past crushed her. I was not just shamed, I was erased, and the world laughed while it happened. The silence that followed was heavy. The human leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. "Do you believe them?" asked quietly. She blinked, caught off guard. "What? Do you believe their lies?" He repeated, his voice calm but sharp. The girl shook her head violently, tears falling. "No. But the crowd does, the city does, everyone does. And what the world believes becomes truth." The human leaned back slowly, his jaw firm. "Then let the world believe what it wants," he said. "It does not decide who you are." His words cut through her despair like a blade. Her breath caught, her eyes widening as she stared at him. No one had ever said that to her. Not even in whispers. For so long she had thought herself alone, but here he was, breaking the chains the world had placed on her with a few simple words. Her tears spilled freely, and she whispered, "Why? Why do you care?" The human's gaze darkened, and for the first time, his voice carried the shadow of old pain. "Because I know what it is to lose everything," Kay said. "I know what it is to be called worthless, to be left behind, to watch those you trusted turn their backs." His eyes grew distant, as if seeing ghosts in the flames. "I lost my family in the war. I buried them with my own hands. And the world did not care." He clenched his fists slowly. "So when I saw them treat you as less than human, I could not stand still. Not again." The girl's lips parted, her breath trembling. His pain reached her, matched hers, and for the first time, she felt connected not by blood, not by race, but by suffering. "You carry scars too," she whispered softly. "Yes," he answered, "but scars are proof we survived." The firelight flickered across both their faces. The girl lowered her head, pressing her forehead against the coat, her tears soaking into the fabric. Slowly, her voice broke the silence again, fragile but sincere. "Then maybe I can survive too." The human gave a faint nod, his voice steady. "You can, and you will. Not because they allow it, but because you choose it in that moment." The room no longer felt like a broken shelter. It felt like the beginning of something new, two souls scarred by loss, bound together by a single act of defiance. The girl had revealed her shame, her truth, but instead of rejection, she found understanding, and for the first time since her fall, she believed the future could still hold something beyond chains. A new beginning. The city awoke with noise. The marketplace alive again with shouting merchants and curious crowds. But among the whispers, one story was louder than any bargain or sale. The story of the human who had thrown his coat around a disgraced alien girl and walked away with her. Some called him a fool, others called him dangerous, and a few, though quietly, called him brave. Inside the small house at the edge of the city, the girl sat near the fire, her thin frame wrapped in both the coat and the blanket. Her eyes no longer looked at the floor as often, though the weight of shame still lingered. Each hour spent in the human shelter gave her something she thought she would never have again: time to breathe, time to exist without fear of being mocked. The human sat across from her, repairing the cut on his hand from the night before. His movements were steady, unbothered by the whispers outside. He was not a man who lived for the world's approval. He was a man who carried his own fire within, and for the girl, that fire had lit a spark in her own heart. "You know they won't stop," she said softly, her voice carrying both fear and warning. "They will come again, the guards, the traitors, maybe even the leaders. They will not forgive you for this." The human looked up, his gaze calm. "Let them come." The words were simple, but the weight behind them made her chest tighten. He was not only protecting her, he was defying an entire city. Her lips trembled. "I am only one girl. I am not worth a war." The human leaned forward slightly, his eyes steady. "You are worth dignity, worth life. Worth more than chains and dirt," he said. His tone carried no hesitation, and that truth shook her more than any insult ever had. Later that day, the noise outside grew louder. A group of city leaders gathered, their robes long and their faces sharp. They demanded answers. Why had a human interfered with their punishment? Why had he challenged their order? The human stepped outside, the girl watching fearfully from the doorway. The leaders sneered, their voices sharp. "You shame yourself by protecting her. You shame your kind by lowering yourself, the humans." Reply was calm, but his words carried through the square. "It is you who shame yourselves when you strip dignity from the weak." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some shouted in anger, others fell silent, and a few turned away in shame. The alien girl clutched the coat tighter, her heart racing. No one had ever spoken for her before. Not in public, not against power. But here he was, standing alone, his voice unshaken. The leaders tried to laugh, to dismiss him, but their words faltered. The humans' courage struck deeper than their pride. The people began to murmur, no longer united in cruelty. Some wondered if they had gone too far. The crowd that once threw garbage now stood uncertain, their eyes shifting between the leaders. And the human, the girl, stepped forward, her body trembling, but her heart pulling her out of the shadows. Her voice cracked, but it carried. "I am not trash," she said. The words silenced the crowd. "I was betrayed. I was broken, but I am still alive." Her tears fell, but her chin lifted, "And he gave me back what you tried to take, my dignity." The human stood beside her, his presence like a shield. The leaders' faces twisted with fury, but they could not strike her now, not with so many eyes watching. The people whispered louder, some nodding, some questioning. A seed had been planted, a dangerous one, the seed of doubt, the seed of change. That night, the girl sat again by the fire, her heart pounding with everything that had happened. She turned to the human, her voice soft. "I thought my story was over, that I would die in shame, but you changed everything." The human shook his head slightly. "No, you changed. You chose to stand, to speak." She smiled faintly, the first true smile in years. "Because you gave me the strength to believe again." The silence stretched. Warm and steady, for the first time, she did not feel like a burden. She felt like someone beginning a new path. Her hands gripped the coat tighter, not out of fear this time, but as a promise. She whispered, "You gave me more than a coat. You gave me a life." The human's lips curved into a faint smile, his eyes soft but strong. "Then live it," he said, and in that moment, the firelight seemed brighter. The girl's shame had not vanished, but it no longer ruled her. The human had stood against the crowd, against power itself, and in doing so, he had given her a new beginning. The world might still hate her. The leaders might still hunt her, but she was no longer nothing. She was alive, she was seen, and she was no longer alone.